Hey, welcome to Cheaper Jeeper TV, the show that helps you get the most for your money so that you get the most for your Jeep. In this week's episode, we're going to learn how you can make things for your Jeep with a 3D printer. So stick around. I have to tell you, I'm pretty excited by the 3D printing solutions available to us as Jeepers. In last week's video, when I looked at the Tow Pro Elite control knob and I looked at one of the forum threads where a person installed it in the cigarette lighter socket, he just had to print that little red ring to mount the knob in, and I thought, well, okay, he used a 3D printer for that solution. Then that got me thinking about the 3D print solution for the front windshield defrost video that I made, where a member of my club just gave me one that he printed, and he got the file to print this defrost vent solution from a website called thingiverse.com. And on that website, people post files to 3D print solutions that they've come up with, and they share it with other people. And so I thought, well, that'd make a great video, and I try to see what other 3D print solutions there are out there for Jeeps. And you could go on that website yourself and you could just search. Now I type Jeep, Jeep Wrangler, Jeep Wrangler JK, JL, Gladiator, and I came across a myriad of solutions, and I couldn't cover them all, but in this video I thought I'd cover a few. And before I get into them, if you're wary about 3D print solutions because you don't own a 3D printer, you don't know how to 3D print, don't worry about that, because I'm going to cover some solutions for people like you in the tip segment of this video. Just so you know, I'll have links in the description section of this video of all the items that I discuss in the same order that they're covered in the video. But as I start to cover some of these 3D print solutions, I'd like to know in the comment section which of them appeal to you. Let's have a look at some of these 3D print solutions for a Jeep. Well, you might remember in last week's video, I was talking about possibly putting the control knob for the trailer brake controller on a panel in front of the cubby here at the front of the Jeep. I would have to fabricate a panel. I talked about a video I saw where a gentleman made one out of metal. Well, wouldn't you know it, in thingiverse.com, there happens to be a 3D print solution where somebody has a file with the dimensions of a friction fit panel that fits perfectly into that cubby. And with that panel there, you could put any types of switches you want. You could put the Tow Pro Elite knob in that area. You could also put some other switches in addition to the Tow Pro Elite trailer brake knob. Here's another file where somebody's designed a switch panel to fit over the cubby where some of us have our electric window switches. So if you have a Jeep that doesn't have electric windows, you have a cubby in that area, and here's a person who's come up with a panel, and you could use that panel to put all sorts of switches for whatever your needs are, whether it's for your winch or for some lights or what have you. I think that looks pretty neat. Now, while we're still here in the front of the cabin of the Jeep, you may have remembered I did a video on this phone mount solution here, which connects to the A-pillar. Well, here's a file where somebody came up with an A-pillar mount with ram mount balls on it, and here's one that has two. So you can have, for example, your action camera facing the front and your GPS facing you. And if you have a JK, here's another file where there's an A-pillar ram mount, and this one has just one ball, but again, there's a solution for you there if you wanted to use these locations to mount either an action camera or your phone or a GPS. Another example of a phone mount, as you can see in this file, is the kind of mount that snaps on the top of the dash here. There are commercial varieties of this, but here's a 3D printed solution. And on the front panel, you just have to put a magnet and your phone will just be held in place right there. And for those of you who have phone mounts that connect to the heating vents, these vents tend to flop around when you hit a bump and it'll move your location of your phone. Whereas this item that you 3D print and wedge into the bottom of the vent will hold those vent flaps in place so that your phone mount won't move and your phone will be stationary as you're driving. And here's an interesting invention where somebody made a mount for these barrel type of dash cams, and it clamps the dash cam to the stem of your rear view mirror. And you can see here in the file, the dash cam is held into that barrel shaped holder, but those two bolt holes are used to straddle around the stem of the rear view mirror, and then the other clamp piece goes on the back and you bolt it together. And that way you've got your dash cam held exactly behind your rear view mirror and you won't even see it. Here's a file where somebody wanted to have their iPad mounted to the grab bar in front of the passenger. Well, you can see here all the different pieces that make up this design. It's pretty complex because there's a few pieces, but he also included a video so that you can see how it's assembled. Now here's an interesting file that somebody made for a JK. It's grenade gear shift knobs. As you can see in this picture, there's the grenade, there's the handle, and here it is where you can see the gear shift knob grenade and the transfer case. I don't know if I would do that for my Jeep. That makes me a little nervous. Now here's a really interesting one, because sometimes at night when you're driving, you know that that's a Jeep coming up because you recognize the light pattern, but you know there's no point in waving because it's dark and they won't even see you. Some of us still might feel inclined to wave anyway. Well, now you can and be seen, because in this file you could see an illuminated Jeep wave, where now at nighttime you can give a Jeep wave and be seen. You can see the front panel is a thin piece that light can transmit through, and the rear panel is deeper, and that's where you mount your wires and your lighting, and then you would connect it to some switch, and then at nighttime you can give a Jeep wave to your fellow Jeepers. And by chance, should you ever lose or tear any of your drain plugs in the floor, you can go ahead and print some new ones for either the JL or the JK. Now here's something that I noticed. Now in some Jeeps, their seat bolts are rusted, and that could be from tracking in salt and sand from the winter or water getting in various ways. And I've sprayed mine with rust proofing, and you could put grease on them, but then you'd be afraid that it might get on some things. So one other step that you could take is to put a cap over those bolts, so it'll be a cover over your grease or rust proofing on the bolts, or just cover the bolts themselves, and you can have the Jeep logo on those caps, or even something custom, and you have a nice cover for those bolts. Now here's something interesting. It's a roll bar S gear hook for the padded rear horizontal bar in the Jeep Wrangler JK. The larger part of the S has a Velcro strap and it secures to the roll bar, and the smaller part of the S is where you can hang your gear. Now as we move to the back of the Jeep, here's a problem that exists that I didn't realize it was a problem until I saw this file. And it's true that when you have the rear hatch for the storage compartment at the back of a JL, the hatch always comes down and gets in the way when you're trying to access things or put things in that storage cubby. Well, now with this little 3D printed hook that you could connect to the back of the rear seat, you take the loop to your storage hatch and connect it to that hook. Now one of the things I wanted to do on my Jeep was I wanted to black out the keyhole location, and I was going to use Plastidip, but I also knew that in time that would chip, or maybe my edges wouldn't be perfect. Well, now I don't need to do that. I could just go ahead and print some black caps that would fit right over those keyholes to black it out. I could even put the Jeep logo on it, or I can customize it by putting a compass rose or my Jeep club name. Here's another thing that I could 3D print, which are hinge protectors, and on my Jeep black ones would look pretty good, I think. Now on the front hood of my Jeep are these caps that cover the bolts that are holding down the wiper arm. Now I could also customize those, take those off, and 3D print ones that have the Jeep logo on them. Here's an interesting device, which is a wiper arm puller. So it hooks up underneath the wiper arm, and then a bolt is screwed into the top, which pulls the wiper arm off of the bolt that's holding the wiper arm down. Now here's something interesting. The Jeep Gladiator pre-runner grill LED mounts that fit perfectly into the hole of the grill of a Jeep Gladiator. An LED light is mounted into this adapter, and it simply clips into the hole in place, and then you can connect your wires to a switch. Now here's what the adapter looks like for the Gladiator, but if you have a Jeep Wrangler JL, there is another mount that you could make that would fit the Jeep Wrangler JL grill, but there is a little bit of cutting for the JL grill that has to take place, but you can still have that on the front of a JL as well. Now this is an interesting item here because you can see how there's the clip that your hood support rod snaps into, and I know on mine it's pretty tight. And it's made out of plastic, and you know, with all the heat under the hood and over time, that plastic's going to get old and brittle. It's going to break. So a really good idea would be to 3D print one of these, keep it in your glove box, and then when that plastic clip at some point in time breaks, you could just replace it. with the one that you 3D printed and have in your glove box. Now, this is a Jeep Wrangler winch circuit breaker mount for a winch, and it just mounts to the inner fender panel right next to your battery, and that's where you can connect your winch circuit breaker to. Nice and easy and out of the way. And the thing about 3D printing, if you need a mount for any of your items, you could just create it. Now, if you saw the video where I showed how to make a louvered vent panel for your windows, you saw that you could manufacture a louvered vent so that if it were to rain, air could still come and go through the Jeep and you don't have to worry about the rain, and you have a screen behind it so it keeps the bugs out. But if you didn't want to make one of those yourself, well, you could just 3D print one, as you can see right here. Not only does it look very professional and sturdy, and it has louvers, there's also an access panel in case you wanted to put a heating duct or if you wanted to run some cabling or wires into the Jeep. And speaking of camping and the good weather that's coming, it'll also be time soon that we could take our doors off and start driving our Jeeps. But what do we do about the doors? Well, why don't we make some hangers? And we could make hangers of one color for the passenger side door and hangers of another color for the driver's side door. And then when we take the Freedom panels off, we could use these hooks to hang up our Freedom panels. The larger hook you use on the bottom of the Freedom panel, and the smaller one clips to the top to hold your Freedom panels in place. And when you come back from your ride, everything's easily accessible. Now, I could go on and on about all kinds of 3D print solutions that people have come up with for their Jeep. And if you've seen some here that you want to print and you're questioning, well, how do I do that? I don't know how to 3D print. I don't have a 3D printer. That's what we're going to talk about in a tip segment coming up next.
Now for some cheaper Jeeper tips.
So in the tip segment, I want to share with you some ideas on how you can meet your 3D printing needs even if you don't want to learn how to 3D print or buy a 3D printer. For example, in my town, in the local library, you can book and use for free a 3D printer. Also, there are people in my Jeep Club that have 3D printers. In fact, that's how I got my hands on this. The plastic filament used to make these items isn't very expensive, and he just handed me a few and said, here, have these. So there may be somebody in your local Jeep Club that has a 3D printer. But also, your local Jeep Club may want to use a 3D printer as a fundraiser where they could make keychains for your Jeep with a grill specific to your Jeep, and it can have your Jeep Club name on it. Or you can make badges for the side of your Jeep that can also have your Jeep Club's name, and you could sell those as a fundraiser. Or maybe badges for the trails that your Jeep Club runs, and they could sell those as a fundraiser as well. And as you do the different trails that your Jeep Club runs, you can put them on the side of your Jeep. And really, if you don't want to do any of those ideas, there are 3D print services for that one or two specific things that you wanted to get printed, and you can just pay them to print that item that you require. There's all kinds of ways to have fun with this. I hope that you enjoyed it. Make sure you put in the comments section below any items that you found particularly interesting. But before we finish this video, let's hear from our subscribers.
And now for subscribers' tips.
This week's subscriber tip comes from our DIY window vents for camping video. Hey Cheaper Jeeper TV, we were able to buy a blank corrugated yard sale sign at Home Depot for under $6 size. That was just the perfect size. I think it was about 18 by 20 inches. Signed, Jason. Hey Jason, what a great tip. I wish I had that in the video, but I guess I do thanks to your tip. And if you have any comments or tips that you'd like to share, please feel free to put them in the comments section below, as they may make it in a future episode. Thank you very much. Hey, I hope you found that interesting, and if you did, how about giving the video a thumbs up? And if you're new to the channel, click the subscribe button right here and hit the alert bell so you'll be notified when our next video is released. Until the next time, I'm Dino for Cheaper Jeeper TV. Be well, stay safe, take care.